Coming up on tonight's This Week in Politics, a riot at the United States Capitol. Supporters of President Trump break doors and windows to gain access to the Capitol. This as members of the U.S. House and Senate were in the midst of certifying the results of the Electoral College. The rioters told to go to the Capitol by the president himself at a rally that was held just blocks away.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
The president's call to action came as both the Republican and Democratic leaders of the U.S. Senate urged their members to not challenge the results of the Electoral College, saying there was no proof to support the president's claim and those of his supporters that there was any voting irregularity or election fraud.
It would be unfair and wrong to disenfranchise American voters and overrule the courts and the states on this extraordinarily thin basis. And I will not pretend such a vote would be a harmless protest gesture while relying on others to do the right thing.
A number of our colleagues have organized an effort to undermine and object to that free and fair election. They're in the minority. They will lose. They know that. They have no evidence of widespread voter fraud upon which to base their objections. That's because there is none.
And in the aftermath of the violent unrest at the Capitol, new calls to remove the president from office, either through the use of the 25th Amendment or impeachment.
In calling for this seditious act, the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people. I join the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this president by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment.
An unprecedented week in the history of this nation and a crossroads for the political life in America. So what happens next? Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Allen. The images will forever be a part of the historic record of the United States. Men and women using whatever makeshift tools they could get a hold of to forcibly break into the seat of American democracy, the United States Capitol, to disrupt what is typically a formal process, the counting of electoral votes, the final sign-off on a presidential election. There were signs that the event would not be the historic formality it has been when several Republican members of both the House and Senate, led by Senators Josh Hawley of Missouri and Ted Cruz of Texas, would attempt to challenge the results of several states and openly question the validity of the American electoral process.
Recent polling shows that 39% of Americans believe the election that just occurred, quote, was rigged. You may not agree with that assessment, but it is nonetheless a reality for nearly half the country.
We do need an investigation into irregularities, fraud. We do need a way forward together. We need election security reforms.
The U.S. House and Senate met to certify election results in a joint session. All members voted to approve the electoral results from Alabama and then Alaska. But when it came to the next state in line, Arizona, a swing state, a challenge was raised. At roughly this same time, a few blocks away, the president was holding a rally, telling supporters the election was rigged, that he did not lose, that his re-election was stolen from him.
This year, using the pretext of the China virus and the scam of mail-in ballots, Democrats attempted the most brazen and outrageous election theft. And there's never been anything like this. It's a pure theft in American history. Everybody knows it.
The president then told his supporters to go to the Capitol, where lawmakers were certifying the election results.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated, lawfully slated.
And then the president's supporters did what he asked. They went to the Capitol, having been told to take back the country. And that's when chaos erupted. Tear gas fired both outside and inside the Capitol. Protesters attempted to break into the chambers of the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, and they succeeded. Gunfire claiming the life of one protester. 3 others died as the result of what's being called medical events. A Capitol police officer died after sustaining injuries in a fight with protesters. Congress was evacuated. We talked with South Dakota Congressman Dusty Johnson after he was evacuated from the U.S. House chamber.
Without objection.
Luckily, we are safe, but it has been a difficult day. The images we are seeing are jarring. The Capitol Police are doing their best, but they have been overrun by people who crave violence. And too many people have for too long been sowing these seeds of anger and division, and this is what you get. This is the tragic harvest, and it needs to stop.
As the conflict at the Capitol continued, there was initially no message from the White House. In Delaware, President-elect Biden called on the president to say something.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege, to storm the Capitol, to smash windows, to occupy offices, the floor of the United States Senate, rummaging through desks, on the Capitol, on the House of Representatives, threatening the safety of duly elected officials. It's not protest, it's insurrection.
Shortly after, in a taped message from the White House, the president did call on his supporters to end the violence and to leave the Capitol, but continued to insist the 2020 presidential election had been stolen from him.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Congress then returned to session to continue the work of validating the Electoral College results in favor of Joe Biden. But lawmakers on both sides of the aisle spoke openly, condemning the president's claims of election fraud.
No congressional audit is ever going to convince these voters, particularly when the president will continue to say that the election was stolen. The best way we can show respect for the voters who are upset is by telling them the truth. That's the burden. That's the duty of leadership. The truth is that President-elect Biden won the election. President Trump lost.
The shame of this day is it's being aided and abetted by good Americans who are falling prey, who are choosing Trump over truth, who are surrendering to the passion of lies as opposed to standing up and speaking truth.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are lawfully elected and will become the president and the vice president of the United States on January the 20th.
In the very early hours of Thursday morning, both the United States House and the United States Senate formally approved the results of the presidential election, acknowledging the victory of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But even more damage had been done to democracy, and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle were openly talking about removing the president from his office. Welcome back to This Week in Politics here on KSFY. The Wednesday riot at the United States Capitol by supporters of President Trump had by Thursday led to calls for removing the president from office. It was the president who for 2 months had repeatedly said his presidential election loss was the result of a rigged process, behind-the-scenes law-breaking involving fraud to steal the election from him. It was the president who on Wednesday before the riot had specifically told his supporters to march to the Capitol and take back their country.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
In the aftermath of all that, a growing number of Republican and Democratic voices calling for the president to be removed from office. This is Republican House member Adam Kinzinger of Illinois.
Section 4 of the 25th Amendment allows a majority of the cabinet and the vice president to assume the duties of the office of presidency until the president is able to himself. It's time to invoke the 25th Amendment and to end this nightmare.
This is former Republican Defense Secretary William Cohen.
It's long overdue. I think the cabinet should have taken action long before, because they have been witness to the kind of irrationality, the kind of action that he has proposed taking in the past.
In addition, a chorus of Democrats are saying the president is not fit to lead for what they say is his role in what happened at the Capitol.
The Vice President can invoke the 25th Amendment today, and if the cabinet votes, he's gone. They should do it now.
If the Vice President and Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment.
Published reports say both Schumer and Pelosi called Vice President Pence to discuss the 25th Amendment and were placed on a 20-minute phone hold, and that the Vice President never picked up. By Thursday night, a new video message from the president, striking a much different tone than we've seen or heard from him, condemning those who carried out the violence at the Capitol and acknowledging that he would clear the way for a new administration on January 20th.
We have just been through an intense election, and emotions are high. But now tempers must be cooled and calm restored. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
You are watching This Week in Politics on KSFY, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to This Week in Politics here on KSFY. Much of the spotlight this week has been on Vice President Mike Pence. In the lead up to the Electoral College certification on Wednesday, the president had put pressure specifically on the vice president, urging him to overturn the election results and declare Trump the victor. In fact, this was the president just before he told his supporters on Wednesday to march to the Capitol.
I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify, and we become president, and you are the happiest people.
But published reports say the vice president told the president last weekend that he did not have the constitutional authority to change anything, and that he wouldn't change anything. And he didn't, earning him praise Wednesday night after the riot by fellow Republican Lindsey Graham.
Vice President Pence, what they're asking you to do, you won't do because you can't.
And while the president says he called in the Washington, D.C. National Guard to assist in restoring order at the Capitol, there are numerous published reports tonight that say it was Vice President Pence who took action and called them in to bring all the violence to an end. And it was the vice president who saw the Electoral College count to its conclusion early Thursday, certifying the results of the 2020 presidential contest in favor of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. On Friday, as President Trump announced he would not be attending Biden's inauguration on January 20th, Pence said he would attend as part of the orderly transfer of power. As we leave you tonight, some of what the vice president said when he reconvened the joint session of Congress Wednesday night following the riot at the Capitol. I'm Brian Allen. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and good evening from Courthouse Square.
To those who wreaked havoc in our Capitol today, you did not win. Violence never wins. Freedom wins. And this is still the people's house. And as we reconvene in this chamber, the world will again witness the resilience and strength of our democracy. May God bless all who serve here and those who protect this place. And may God bless the United States of America. Let's get back to work.